going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing 5 studio albums that are essentially greatest hits albums. At times when it comes to albums from bands, there will be some singles that'll be released from it, some other tracks that are performed live, and some filler tracks that usually lead into deep cut territory. However, there are some albums where the consistency factor is so strong that almost every song can be found in an artist's live set or be featured on various compilations and box sets that focus on a particular artist's work. And I figured this would be a fun concept to cover, and as you will see with the picks that I selected for this video, these albums in general have a lot more going for them as opposed to just them simply being another album release that just happens to feature all killer and no filler. Careers had broken through or peaked, new members have joined, there just seems to be this magic surrounding the band that just pushes them to create the greatest work they could possibly make, and that surely comes across in the albums that I selected for this video. So as I always say, enough of the chit chat, let's jump into what this video is all about. Now, of course, my favorite band of all time is Kiss, and I wanted to work them into this concept, and the one album in particular that came to mind is their self-titled debut. A band's debut album sets the tone of their career, and it is the culmination of everything they had gone through to get to this point, and it brings together material that will ultimately define them for years to come. Now, some of the songs on this album were written while Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were in the pre-Kiss band Wicked Lester, and many of these songs were performed live in various clubs around New York in 1973, right around the time that they would get a record deal with Casablanca. And on this album, you have tracks like Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce, 100,000 Years, and Black Diamond. You really cannot go wrong with this. If anything, if you start your Kiss journey with this album, you are off at a fantastic start. And even deep cuts like the song Let Me Know are very much in classic Kiss territory for diehard fans. And what is amazing is that it is most of these songs that Kiss performed at their first live concert back in January of 1973. And to this day, they are still performing them live, and it just goes to prove their staying power. In terms of where these songs have appeared elsewhere on record, almost half of their classic live album Kiss Alive comprises of tracks off of this album, and many tracks in demo or album form have appeared on various compilations and box sets. Next up is Creedence Clearwater Revival's Cosmos Factory. This album was the band's 5th album in 2 years. They were on a real prolific streak, and by the time this album was being worked on, they had already become the most popular band in America, and standing out in a way by not blending in with their psychedelic peers. It features so many amazing songs such as Traveling Band, Looking Out My Back Door, Run Through the Jungle, Up Around the Bend, Who'll Stop the Rain, their cover of I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and Long As I Can See the Light. And even some of the remaining songs that don't get a lot of emphasis, particularly the opener Ramble Tamble, is deeply rooted in classic Creedence territory, and it can be seen as another fine track from them. And the album itself hit #1 in the charts, and the 3 resulting singles were within the top 5 in the Billboard Top 100, and it has sold over 4 million copies, so this album surely has resounded with many listeners. I think it perfectly brings together all of the essential elements that make up the Creedence sound as we know. Raucous rockers, jams, and covers. And in terms of where these songs have appeared elsewhere on record, if you take a look at the Chronicle compilation, roughly a third of the track list comprises of songs from this album. So even as far back as the 70s when that compilation came out, you can see how much of an impact Cosmos Factory had made on the public. Next up is Billy Joel's The Stranger. This album was very much the breakthrough album for Billy. Albums that came before this, such as Piano Man, Street Life Serenade, and Turnstiles, didn't sell enough to have him retained on Columbia. So this album was very much a do-or-die kind of album. This was also the first time that he collaborated with producer Phil Ramone, a working relationship that would last almost 10 years. And the end result this first time around turned out to be Billy's best-selling album, selling over 10 million copies worldwide, and it became Columbia's best-selling title alone. And on this album, you have singles such as Just the Way You Are, Moving Out Anthony's song, She's Always a Woman, and Only the Good Die Young. And then you also have the title track and songs such as Vienna and the epic scenes from an Italian restaurant that are staples in his live show. And even the other two songs, such as Get It Right the First Time and Everybody Has a Dream, are brilliantly crafted and round off the album nicely, only to be rounded off by the whistle theme from the title track, which wraps up the album in a rather full circle style. This album was the start of a string of successful albums that would run until 1993's Book of Dreams, and what an album to start that string off with, because following up an album of this sort with so many amazingly crafted songs that supersede their potential to become huge hits is quite daunting to think about. And in terms of where these songs have appeared elsewhere on record, about 66% of this album has appeared on his Greatest Hits Volume 1 compilation. Next up is the Yes album by none other than Yes. This album was the first to feature guitarist Steve Howe, and it was the miracle that they needed at this moment in time. Their first two albums had been commercial failures, so they retreated to the English countryside, wrote and recorded this album, which was a commercial breakthrough for the group as it peaked at number 4 in the UK charts. And while this record retains the harmonies, the Hammond organ, and the melodic bass lines from older releases, this also works in some fresher influences such as jazz, funk, and acoustic music. And it also marked the first time that they had assembled the longer pieces on this album from various smaller bits, which was a method that they would use on Close to the Edge. And it resembles very much a modular recording style, almost reminds me of how the Beach Boys went about recording Good Vibrations. But this album features some Yes classics such as Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship Trooper, I've Seen All Good People, and Perpetual Change. Newcomer Steve Howe gets a solo spotlight on this album with his acoustic composition Clap. And the one track that may be deemed as a deep cut is A Venture, which was revived recently in the live set when they proved how integral this album was to their legacy by performing it live amongst other albums from start to finish. In terms of where these songs have appeared elsewhere on record, roughly a third of it appears on their classic triple live album Yes Songs, and various songs have appeared in their full or edited single form on various compilations and box sets. Last but not least is Invisible Touch by Genesis. A bit of a polarizing album depending on which Genesis fan you ask. People tend to knock this album down because it tends to come across more in the pop vein, similarly to Phil Collins' solo work. But believe it or not, there are some proggy moments on this album, but that is a topic for a whole other video. This album proved to be the band's best-selling album, selling over 7 million copies worldwide, and the album's supporting tour concluded with 4 consecutive nights at Wembley Stadium in London in front of altogether 300,000 people. I think it's safe to say that that singular moment would be the peak of any artist's career, and I think that is surely the case with Genesis. In terms of the contents of this album, 5 out of the 8 songs on this album were released as singles. We had the title track itself, Invisible Touch, Throwing It All Away, In Too Deep, Land of Confusion, and Tonight, Tonight, Tonight. And actually, that last particular single is one of the proggier moments of the album. The album version is 9 minutes long, and then the single version is 4 minutes long. And then the second epic on this album is the song Domino, which is split into 2 parts, In the Glow of the Night and The Last Domino. Mike Rutherford thinks it is one of the best things the band has ever done, and it became a live staple ever since. And then we have a pop song with Anything She Does. While not released as a single, they did a rather funny video for it, which also starred Benny Hill and his Fred Scuttle character. And then the album ends with a quirky instrumental, The Brazilian, which I think was quite progressive for the time. Most times when you hear Genesis songs being played on FM radio, chances are it'll be a song off of this album, and many songs from this album have appeared in set lists of various reunion appearances. So there you guys go. Those are 5 studio albums that are essentially greatest hits album. What other studio albums do you feel are essentially greatest hits albums? Please drop a comment down below. I'd love to know. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support this channel, be sure to check me out on Patreon. See you guys in the next video. And most importantly, keep the records spinning.